Today we're going to be doing Simplicity Pattern 2588 from the Project Runway line. As you can see, you have many different dresses on the front, and if you buy this pattern, you can make any one of these dresses. They're just showing you all the different variations that are in this one pattern envelope. So to find this pattern, you need to look at this number. This is the key. So when you look in the Simplicity cabinets, this is the number that you're going to pull out in order to get this particular pattern. The other thing you want to make sure to look for is the size. Now this pattern envelope has sizes 12 through 20. There's another one with sizes 4 through 12. So you want to make sure that when you pull the envelope that you get one that has your size in it. Now these sizes do not correspond with commercial retail sizes. You're definitely going to want to consult the back of the pattern envelope to make sure that your measurements fit the size that they list. When you look at the back of a pattern envelope, one of the first things that you should see would be fabric recommendations. So what's nice is the pattern companies have already done the research and they have a list of recommended fabrics for making these particular dresses. So you see we have cotton, cotton blends, and so on. The next box after that is going to be notions. Notions are extra things besides fabric that you'll need in order to complete this. So you'll need matching thread, one 22-inch zipper, hook and eye, and then probably other notions and trims and stuff depending on what dress you make. So they're going to give you more information below. Next we have body measurements. So you'll see bust, waist, hip 9 inches below waist, back, neck to waist. So you're definitely going to want to get your measurements when you're picking out your pattern because you need to know what size you're going to be and if you fall in this pattern envelope. So right here, all of these are in inches. So bust for the first one is if your bust is a 29.5 inch, and then your waist would be a 22 inch, and then your hips would be 31.5 inches. So after you take your measurements, you're going to look to see which one best fits you, and if you look right below here for pattern size, this is going to be the one for you. To get an accurate way on taking your own measurements, you can check out our website on ProfessorPincushion.com where we have a video tutorial showing you how to do that. Next is the fun part. We get to choose what dress we're going to make. And what I like about this line, the Project Runway line, is that they give you a sheet like this that breaks down all the different elements. So you see we have 2 different yokes. This is for the neck, 1 bodice, so that's simple. We don't have to worry about that. We have actually 3 different options for the sleeves. You have this little puffy sleeve, the fitted sleeve, and you can go sleeveless. This is the detail elements for around the waist if you want a bow or a belt or a little tie, and then 2 different types of skirts, so a fitted skirt or a flared skirt. So what I like to do is I'll make a copy of each of these elements and then I'll cut out so I can kind of use this as a paper doll and create what kind of dress style I want to make. So for this particular example, I'm going to make a dress with a small yoke, and then we'll just put the bodice here because that's the only bodice we get. So just fit it like that. I'm going to do the fitted skirt, and I'll do the fitted sleeves. So this kind of gives me an idea of which dress I'm going to make, and then once I decide which elements I'm going to use, I can either write them down in the notes, circle them, so then when I'm trying to figure out how much fabric I need from the back of the pattern envelope, I can quickly look at this and it helps me make that decision. So it just makes it a lot easier, and you can play with it and shift the different elements around so you can see what other options look like. So now we're going to go back to the back of the pattern envelope and figure out how much yardage we need of our fabric in order to make this particular dress. After we decide what dress we're going to make, we can now look at the back and see how much fabric we're going to need to make whatever dress we want. So you'll see here there's different amounts of yardage, and this correlates to the sizes up here. So if I'm doing a size 14, everything that falls below here correlates with size 14. So for this dress in bodice and slim skirt, for 45-inch fabric under size 14, I would need 2 yards. So everything in here is in yards. Now, I'm just going to make a check mark next to everything that I'm making, just so I can keep everything straight and organized. So I'm doing the dress bodice and a slim skirt, so I already have a check there. dress bodice, and flared skirt. I'm not doing that one because I'm doing this one, so I don't have to worry about that. I am doing the flat sleeve. I'm not doing the pleated sleeve. That's the one that has the puff at the top. The yoke, no, and neckband is yes. The yoke is the wider neckline and the neckband is a skinny one. So I'm doing the small one. And then this is extra if you wanted to do something in addition to making the dress. So you can do a bow or a belt or something like that. So you would look down here if you wanted to add something extra to the dress. So I'm just going to do these 3 elements. And you'll see here there's 45-inch and 60-inch. This is actually for how wide the fabric is. Fabric usually comes 45 inches or it comes 60 inches. If you get something wider like a 60 width inch fabric, you're gonna need less fabric. So if I look at for a size 14, if I have 45, I need 2 yards. If I have a 60-inch width fabric, I need 1.5. So I need a ½ yard less for size 14. So I actually already bought my fabric and it's 60 inches. So I need 1.5 to make the bodice and the slim skirt. I go to my next check. I need 3/8 of a yard, a 45 or 60. So you'll see this says it doesn't matter if you have 45 or 60 inch, you're still going to need the same amount. So I'm going to add 3/8 to my 1.5. I don't need this one. I'm not doing the big yoke, I'm doing the smaller neckband. I need ½ a yard, again a 45 or 60 inch. So I'm going to circle that, and then I'm going to add all these up. Now it says if you have fabric that has plaids or stripes or some one-way design, or maybe your fabric has a lot of nap, you're probably going to need extra yardage. So maybe just add a ½ yard if that happens to be your case. But I'm just going to add up mine, and that's going to be 2 3/8 yard of fabric I'm going to need in order to make my dress with a flat sleeve, neckband, and slim skirt. Now you see under here it also says interfacing. We need interfacing for the neckband area, so it has a little support there. So I will need 3/4 of a yard of lightweight fusible interfacing. So I'm going to add that to my list. And again, for if you wanted to add a little something extra, you could add buttons, trim. And it tells you, like if I wanted to do a little tab, which is a little half belt that goes around just your sides, I would need 3/8 of a yard, interfacing, and buttons, 2 1-inch buttons. So you would look here if you want to do something extra. I'm actually going to do a belt made out of a ribbon, and I'm using a velvet ribbon trim that I actually got on simplicity.com. And I'm just going to add that on my own. So that would be my own little addition. So now that we know how much fabric we need and of interfacing and extras, we're now going to start looking at the inside of the pattern directions. Next, we're going to know which patterns that we need to use to make our dress. So you're going to pull out your Simplicity pattern directions, and you're going to see a chart that looks like this. Here we have pattern diagrams, and underneath they actually say what each pattern is, and you'll see a number next to it that corresponds with the number on these pieces up here. So again, I'm going to use my pen and I'm going to make a check mark next to each piece that I need to cut out for my dress. So 1 and 2 is the yoke. I'm doing the neckband, so I don't have to cut out that. Number 3 and 4 is the neckband. I'm doing that one. So these are the pieces I need to cut out. I need to cut out bodice front, bodice side front, bodice back. Armhole facing we would have to do if we were doing a sleeveless dress. I'm not, I'm doing the flat sleeve, so I'll do 10, 11. The pleated sleeve, I don't have to do it. We have the slim skirt, front, back, slim skirt pocket. Next is the flared skirt, and then if we were to do any of the tabs, bows, knots, belts, we would cut out these. So I need to cut out pattern pieces 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10, 11, 13, 14, 15. So this is nice because it saves us time and lets us know that we don't need to cut out every single piece that we find here, just the ones that we need for our particular project. When you pull out your pattern pieces out of your envelope, you'll see they'll be printed on giant pieces of tissue paper, which is too large for us to even show on camera, so we're just showing you a part of it. Now, you'll see that on each pattern piece, we'll have the brand, Simplicity, and the pattern number, 2588. So that way, if you have your pieces just lying out, you'll again be able to match them to the particular pattern that you're working for. Also, each pattern piece has the name, so this is the bodice back, and it has the pattern number. Just as we were looking at the diagram before with the number, this number is the same as that. So if I need to cut out pattern number 7, then this is the one I'm cutting out, and I can check and see it's the bodice back. So that's what's helpful. So what you're going to do is you're going to look until you find your size. I'm doing a size 14. So I'm going to follow the line that's right above size 14. So you're going to cut right on the line or just a little bit past that line. Don't cut into it. You always want to be able to see that line or cut right on top of that line all the way around my pattern until I cut it out. Now if you look over here, there's only a single line. So this means for all sizes. So no matter what size you are, you're going to cut on this line right here. You'll also notice these little triangles. I have one right here, and I have two right next to each other right here. These are called notches. Now these are very important because you're usually matching them up to other pattern pieces, just as if you were doing a puzzle. So what you're going to do in order to mark them, I'm going to do size 14, is you have two choices. Some people like to cut right in there so you have an inverted triangle going into your pattern piece. I like to do an outward triangle, so I'm just going to cut here and here, so then I can still see this triangle, and then I have one sticking out. In cases where there's two, you can do two of them, or you can do like me, where I do one big triangle, and then I just cut the tip of that triangle so it's flat on top. You'll also notice pieces, such as this one, where there are only a few sizes listed. I have 12, 16, and 20. I'm doing size 14, and it's not on here. What this means is that there is another pattern number 4 that's somewhere in this, on this tissue paper, that has the size that I need. So I won't cut out this one, but I'm going to find the other one here and cut out that size 14. So I'm going to go ahead and cut out all my pattern pieces that I need, and then we're going to talk about layout on our fabric. Now we're going to look at cutting layouts and our pattern directions. What this does is tell you how you should lay out your pattern so that you can get the most out of your fabric and get everything to fit. There are a couple of keys here. You'll see here, this represents pattern printed side down, if it's more of the shaded color. If it's white, then the pattern is printed side up when you see it in the layout. So first we're going to make sure we find our correct layout. This is for dress, bodice, and slim skirt. This is exactly what I'm doing, and it tells you which pieces are being used right here. You'll see the list of numbers. Now you'll see a setup here and a setup here. If you look over to the left, you'll see 44, 45, and 58 and 60. This means if you have 44 or 45 with fabric, you're going to be using this kind of a layout. If you have 58 or 60-inch fabric, you're going to be using this kind of a layout. You'll also see that on one side here and here, it'll say fold, and up here it'll say salvages. This means that the fabric has been folded in half. This is the fold line right here, and these are the edges of the fabric up here. So that means whatever we cut out in this piece, we're going to either get two pieces, such as two pieces of number 14, or if the fabric is placed on the fold, which we can see for number 5 and number 13, and you can also tell because it has sort of a line shape that looks like a little bracket right here and here. This means that we're going to cut it out and get one big piece for number 13 and one big piece for number 5. So my fabric is 60 inches in width, so I'm going to use this layout. And all these pieces are showing me exactly how it should be laid out. For number 15, which is the pocket, we actually only have one pattern piece for a pocket because we only need one. And what you do is you pin it and you cut it out here. So you'll get two pieces of number 15. Then you flip it over, as you can see the shaded area, so the the printed side is face down, and you cut it out again. So you should have a total of 4 pieces for number 15 when all is said and done. So the only ones that get placed in the fold in this one again is 13 and 15. Everything else does not need to be on the fold, and I'm going to show you how exactly this setup looks like on the actual fabric. So here we have the pattern layout like the diagram that was previously shown. Now before you start laying out your pieces and cutting out your fabric, it's very important to pre-treat your fabric. You don't want to have to worry about your garment shrinking after you've already made it and nothing comes already washed. If you need any more information, you can check out our tutorial on ProfessorPincushion.com, and it'll tell you all about pre-treating fabric. So getting back to the layout, you'll notice that I have 5 and 13 on the fold line, and I have 15 over there, and all I have to do is pin that, cut it out, and then flip it over so it's upside down and cut it out again. Now you'll notice 2 pieces missing from the diagram. I do not have 8 and 9, which were supposed to be down at the end by 15. That's because that's the armhole facing, and I'm not doing a sleeveless dress, so therefore I don't need to cut out those pieces. So we're going to get a little bit closer so we can show you how to pin your garments. Here are some of those same patterns up close. Here I have the number 5, and you can see it's right on the fold. You have these broken set of arrows right here, and this is another indication that it needs to be placed in the fold. You also have these arrows on these other pattern pieces, which are just a straight arrow, and this has to do with the grain line of the fabric. You always want these arrows to be going in the same direction. In my case, they're all going parallel to the edge of the fabric. If I had this one going this way, now it's going in a different grain line. For some fabrics, it doesn't matter. If your fabric happens to have a nap or a direction, then it's going to cause a problem later when you're putting your pieces together. So it's just always a good idea to have those arrows in the same direction. So now I'm going to show you how to go about pinning this. Let me get some of my straight pins. And I'm going to take my straight pin and I'm going to put it on my pattern parallel to the edge of the fabric. If I put it parallel to the edge of my pattern piece. If I put it perpendicular to that edge, it gets to be a problem if the pin is sticking out and then you go ahead and try to cut and you have a pin in your way. So that's why it's always a good idea just to put it along the edge in a parallel fashion. So I usually start in the corner and then kind of spread the pattern, working my way out this way. You can go ahead and iron your pattern pieces if you want them to lie a little bit more flat and a little easier to work with. Just make sure you have your iron on a very low setting, as we don't want to singe our tissue paper. Okay, so let's look at the rest of these pattern layouts. We can ignore this one because that's for the flared skirt. I'm doing the flat sleeve, so I'm going to do this layout. Again, we have it on the fold. Pieces 11 and 10. 10 is upside down, so the printed part of the pattern is facing down towards the fabric. Pleated sleeve, we can ignore. Yoke, well, I'm doing the skinny neckband, so I can ignore this. This interfacing goes with this, so again, ignore. And here is my neckband. So I'm going to do it here on the fold, pieces 3 and 4. And then we're going to do the interfacing right here. So I'm going to go ahead and do the layout and show you what it looks like for the flat sleeve, neckband, and interfacing. Here we have the last of our fabric setup. I have number 11, number 10 upside down. Number 3 is on the fold, and you see this arrow that's been broken and is pointing down. That's how you know that goes on the fold. Number 4. And of number 3 and number 4, I need to do this twice. So I can pin this, cut it out, then I just move number 3 and do it again. The same with number 4. So now we're going to show you for the interfacing. The last thing I need to cut out is my fusible lightweight interfacing. And I'm going to cut out piece number 3 and number 4. Number 3 again is on the fold. And if you look at your pattern pieces, it actually tells you how much you need to cut of each thing. So cut 2 on the fold of fabric, which we just did in the last one. Cut 1 on the fold of interfacing. So as soon as I cut this out, that's all I need to do. I don't have to do this twice like in the last case. Same with number 4. just cut it out once and I'll get 2 pieces, which is what I need. Now you notice I don't have pieces 8 and 9. That is for the armhole facing for the sleeveless dress, which I'm not doing, so I don't need to worry about it. When you cut out your pieces, again, you're going to cut right alongside this line as carefully as you can, and don't forget to also cut out your notches because we definitely need that on our fabric pieces. Before removing your pattern pieces, it's important to make note of these marks here. You'll see circles, and I have circles here for the dart section. Now this is usually for placement of something or to match something up. So that's why it's important to transfer these marks onto your fabric pieces so it'll come in handy when you're sewing the garment together. Now you only need to pay attention to the ones that have your size. Right here I have 12, 14, 16. I'm doing 14, so I only need to do that one. If you have a circle that has no number next to it or in it, then it's one for all sizes. So you're going to go ahead and mark that. To mark it, I'm going to take my straight pin, put it through my circle with my size, and then I'm going to flip it over and mark it. So I know where it is. And since there is 2 pieces, because I cut this out with the fabric folded in half, I'm just going to remove that side pin, lift up the tissue paper, and do the one on top as well. So anytime if I see a circle, that's how I'm going to do it. Now you see this one's a bit more complicated because there's tons of circles up here with no numbers next to it, and then you have them down here. This is for making the dart. So I definitely need to make note of this, and it's a little bit more difficult. This one's easy because you have the sizes right next to it. This one right here is size 14. So I would go ahead, put my pin in, mark it, and then for the other ones, because we're going to have 2 up here somewhere, very carefully have to take your fingers, follow along the lines. So I follow this one. There's my dot right here, which I would mark. And then on the other side, I'm going to follow this line. And there's my mark right there. Once you've marked these 2 at the top and this one at the bottom, I would go ahead, line up my ruler to each dot, and then draw this dotted line to them, because that's what we're going to use as a guideline to sew our dart. So you go ahead, look over every single pattern piece, and mark all your circles, darts, and pleats. Next, we're going to be looking at the sewing directions. This helps us put our garment together step by step, and you have your pictures on one side and then your written directions as well. So up here is the fabric key. This helps us look at these pictures over here. If it's kind of a solid color, that's going to be the right side of the fabric or garment. So this bodice, we're looking at the right side of it. If it's white, that's the wrong side of the garment and fabric, such as right here. If it's white with these little pound signs, that's for interfacing, and the polka dot is for lining. It's also a good idea to read the general directions, which are on page 1. That gives you tips and also tells you what the seam allowance is going to be for your project. In this particular case, it's the standard seam allowance, which is 5/8 of an inch. So again, we have the pictures, and you'll see there's numbers here. These correspond to the numbers over on this side. So if I'm doing direction number 1, I can read it and then look at the picture. With both of these together, it makes it very handy in figuring out what step you're going to do. Now the one thing you have to pay attention to, not every single direction is going to apply to the dress you are making. That's why it's very important to read it first before going ahead and just doing it. Such as for this one, in this block down here, it says for sleeveless bodice. If I'm not doing a sleeveless dress, then I don't have to worry about these steps here. So that's why it's important just to pay attention and make note of which directions you're going to be following for your dress. So now we're going to get started with the first step. Step number 1, stay stitch upper edge of bodice front and back 1/2 inch from cut edge in the direction of the arrows. So here I have my front bodice, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to stitch this area right here. So you can start from here and go to here, or from here and go to here. It doesn't really matter which direction you're going to do. This stitch is going to stay in permanently, and what it does, it helps keep the nice curve of your neckline without worrying about it getting stretched out or something like that. So you want to make sure that you stitch a 1/2 inch away from this edge. So your stitch is going to be about right here. And you can go ahead and do the longest stitch on your machine. Just make sure that you back stitch on both ends, because this stitching is going to stay in for the whole garment. So you're going to do it for the bodice. You're also going to do it for the back of your garment. And the neckline on the back is actually up here. So you only need to do it from here to here, and you're going to be doing it on both pieces because there's 2 back pieces. And I have one here, and then I have one right underneath it, right here. And you're not stitching these pieces together, you're just doing them individually just along the neckline. So I'm going to go ahead and break out my machine so I can do it for all 3 pieces. Again, I'm doing my stay stitch, and I'm not going to forget to do my back stitch here. 1/2 inch away from the edge using my longest stitch on my machine, and doing it right along the neckline. And I'm doing this for the front and back bodice. Pin bodice to front to bodice side front sections and stitch. That's step number 2. So here we have the bodice front. I'm then going to take my bodice side pieces, and you'll notice I have these little notches right here. That's going to match up with the bodice side. So here I have one, and you're going to do one on this side and one on this side, but I'm just going to show one side. And you're always going to place your pieces right side of fabric to right side of fabric. So this is the wrong side, right side, right side. So first off, if you just lay this here, it looks like it doesn't match. That's because it's curved and you just have to kind of work with it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to match up my top corner with my top corner here. And put in my straight pin. And then I'm going to match up each one of my notches. So this notch here, and then this edge here. Once you do that, it'll be a lot easier to pin this whole edge, and so you can stitch it the standard 5/8 inch seam allowance. So I'm going to go ahead and finish pinning this and then stitch it, and then we'll move on to the second part of step 2. When doing your seam allowance, you're going to line up the edge of your fabric with the 5/8 inch line right here, and you're always going to do a few stitches, and then I like to do a couple of back stitches. So we always like to knot the end of our stitches so they don't unravel later. I do a normal width stitch, and I just go along. And as I come along my pins, I take out my pins because I don't like sewing over them and taking the chance I'm going to break my needle. And I'm just making sure that the edge of my fabric's always lined up with this line here. And I'm just going to go to the end, and then I'm going to do another back stitch. As you can see, my 2 pieces lined up perfectly. I have all the pins doing in between my notches and the ends. So even though it looked a little difficult at first, once you get the major parts pinned in, it works out fine. After you finish stitching your seams right here on the side, you're then going to finish up the last of part 2, which is clipping your notches. You can kind of see I have them over here. Now this is what you always do whenever you stitch a seam on a curved area. It just helps the seam lie a little flatter and look a little neater. So I only need to do it on the curved area, which is going to be from the top to probably about here. This is pretty straight, so I don't have to worry about that. And all I'm going to do is clip a little inward notch. Oops, I didn't cut that off all the way. Let me try that again. Like that. So it's like a little triangle. There we go. It's just a little hard to see at this angle what I'm doing. So there's one, and you just be sure not to cut into your stitching, as that will create a hole. And I would do it about every 1/2 inch or so. Once you're done clipping your notches on both sides, you're then going to go to your ironing board, and you're going to press your seam towards the middle of your bodice of the front. So this is the front bodice, this is the side. I'm going to take this and press my seam this way. On this side, I'm going to press my seam going in this direction. So they're going to be facing each other. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then we're going to move on to the next step. If you were putting the tab on your dress, then you would follow directions 3 and 4. I'm going to go ahead and move on to number 5. To make darts in bodice back with right sides together, fold the fabric through the center of the dart, bringing together the broken lines and small dots together. On inside, place pins at right angles to broken lines. Stitch the dart from wide end to point. Alright, so what we're going to do is, you'll see I have my dart written out here. It's kind of hard to tell, but I have my 2 small dots here and then my big dot here. I have the wrong side of the fabric facing up towards me, so the right side is facing towards the table. I'm going to fold together like this, so it's right side to right side. I'm going to put a pin right here at my point where I have the dot at the end. And again, you're putting the pins perpendicular to where you're going to be stitching on the edge. So I have my pin like this, holding those 2 sides together. I'm now going to bring this together, and hopefully this dot is going to line up with this dot on this side. I'm going to take my straight pin, put it toward the dot I can see, look over, and it's going right through the other dot. Perfect. I'm going to pull it tight, and now I'm going to pin from this point to this point, lining up the dotted line on one side with the dotted line on the other side. This line is where I'm going to stitch at the machine, which we'll show you next. So I'm just checking both sides when I put my pin through to make sure they line up. And I'm going to do this on both back pieces. I'm only showing on one, but you can also do this to the other one. And this is what's going to create our dart in the back. When sewing my dart, I always like to start at the widest point of the dart. Don't forget to do a couple of back stitches. And then using a regular width stitch, just gonna follow along with my dotted line that I drew there. Now you don't have to do a back stitch when you get to the tip of the dart. And the reason is, you're just going to run your stitch right off the fabric, which I'll show you. And then once you're done with that, you're then going to tie a knot by hand. This will just create or prevent a bubble at the tip of your dart and help the tip lie a little bit more smoothly. So I'm getting to that point. Okay, and then once I get to my last point, right here, I'm just gonna take this and just keep sewing until I'm right off my fabric, and then I'm gonna pull it out. And then right here, all I'm gonna do, loop around the thread, my end thread here. And I know it's probably hard to see, but I'm pulling the end through that loop and then pulling the loop until it forms a knot, trying to get as close to the edge as I can. So then I can go ahead and trim that off, and I'm going to do it for my other one, and then we'll move to the next step for step 5. When you finish doing your 2 darts on the back, you're going to want to make sure that you press your dart fabric toward the center of the back. The center is the edge that has no notches at all. See how this one has 1 notch? This has nothing. So same thing with this side. It's going to be pressed in this direction, and this one is going to be pressed in this direction. Step number 6, stitch bodice front to bodice back at side seams. So here we have the bodice front with the sides stitched on, and it's garment side, right side facing up. So here is our side seam, side seam. I'm going to take my back and I'm going to match up the side seam, matching up the ends here and the notch. So again, right sides together. So the right side of my back's going to the right side of my front. And I'm going to get my straight pins, and I'm going to do the same thing on this other side with my other back. I'm going to pin these edges together, matching the raw edges. And then I'm going to stitch a standard 5/8 inch seam allowance. After you're done with that, you're going to press your seams open, and we'll move on to the next step. Now we're going to be moving on to our flat sleeves. So we're skipping the directions until number 11, and it says, for the first part, stitch flat sleeve front to flat sleeve back, stitch underarm seam. So here I have number 10 and number 11, and you can tell number 11 the back of the sleeve because it has the double notch, while the front of the sleeve has a single notch. So what we're going to do is we're going to place them right sides together. I have the right sides facing up towards us, and we're going to match this edge, matching these corners right here and the two notches. So I'm going to go ahead and flip these like this. I'm going to pin along here, and then it also wants us to stitch the underarm seams, which is this little edge right here. So I'm also going to stick pins here, here, and then I'm going to stitch a 5/8 inch seam allowance on both sides and press my seams open. Then we'll move to the second part of step number 11. My two sleeve pieces have been stitched together right here and right here. And now I'm going to move on to the next step. We're going to be doing the hem. It says press under hem allowance on lower edge of sleeve. This area right here is the lower edge of the sleeve, so this is the area that we're going to be working. And if you look at your pattern, it says 5/8 of an inch hem allowed. So that's how we know how much we're pressing under. Now I have my sleeve still wrong side out, and I'm going to fold this over 5/8 of an inch, just like it said on the pattern piece. Once I have that, I'm going to stick a pin to hold it, like that. And I'm going to do this all the way around the whole bottom of the sleeve. Once I've done that, I'm going to press it. So we have a nice sharp crease right here on the end. Once you have that, then you're going to go around the sleeve again. You're going to take this raw edge, you're going to fold it under to meet that crease, and you're going to end up with a little narrow fold, just like that. And you're going to stick a pin in it and press it again. Once you've done that all the way around, what you're going to do is we're going to stitch right along the top of this fold line right here, so we can hold it and it'll look nice and neat. So I'm going to go ahead and do all my pressing, and then I'll be back at the machine to do the hem stitch. When stitching your hem, you want to sew as close to this edge as possible, and you're just doing a regular width stitch all the way around. And when you finish doing this for both of your sleeves, you're ready to attach it to your bodice. After you finish doing your hem on your sleeves, you can skip directions 12 and 13 and move straight to 14 because that's for the pleated sleeve, and we're not doing that. So number 14 is turn sleeve right side out, hold garment wrong side out with armhole toward you. With right sides together, pin sleeve to armhole edge of front and back, matching underarm seams. Baste, stitch, stitch again 1/8 inch from the first stitching, trim seam below notches close to stitching, press seam toward sleeves. So I know that sounds like a lot, but we're going to do this. So here I have my bodice, wrong side facing up. You can see my press seam right here. Now this is the front, the side, and the back. So I'm just going to show you how to do this armhole right here. I'm going to take my finished sleeve right here. You can see I did my hem right here, and I have it right side out. This is the underarm seam. This is the really short one. This seam is going to match this seam right here, but we need to make sure that we do right sides together. So I'm going to go underneath, match it up, pin it like that. Now we also have some notches that we need to match. I have on here on my back a double notch, on my sleeve double notch. So those are going to line up, and I'm going to pin that. On the other side, I have a single notch on my sleeve, a single notch. So then that's going to be pinned up. And then I'm going to match this end with this end of the sleeve, and the same thing on this side. This corner matches this corner. So once that's all pinned up, you're then going to go to your machine, and for this little U shape, you're going to baste your 5/8 inch seam allowance. That means you're doing your largest stitch on your machine. You don't have to do a back stitch because it's just to hold the sleeve in place. After you finish basting it, you're then going to stitch right over that basting stitch. So you're going to stitch 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, and then you're going to do another one 1/8 in from that. So it would be a 1/2 inch. So you stitch 5/8 seam allowance, then a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So I'm going to go ahead and pin this and start stitching it, and then I'll give you a closer look to you so you can see exactly what that looks like. At this point, I've stitched both my sleeves to my bodice. This again is the underarm of the sleeve, and here we have our 2 notches. And you can see my 2 rows of stitches here. I have one at the 5/8 inch seam allowance, and the one right above it is the 1/2 inch seam. So what you're going to need to do at this point is you need to trim the seam allowance down as close to the 1/2 inch, right above that 1/2 inch as you can go, between this double notch and the single notch right over here. When you're finished trimming that down, you're going to take this part of your seam allowance and you're going to press it so that it goes into the sleeve. So instead of pressing it so it goes out towards the bodice, you're going to go towards the sleeve. So you just want to press your sleeve really nice and flat and make sure that the seam allowance goes inward into the sleeve instead of outward into the bodice. You'll see that the next series of steps is for the yoke, and I'm doing the neckband. So I'm going to skip to direction number 27, apply fusible interfacing to the wrong side of front and back neckband. So here I have parts of my neckband. I have one of the front and 2 of the back right up here. I also have my fusible interfacing. And I trim my down so it's a little bit smaller than my actual piece, which is fine because you don't need the interfacing where you're going to have any seam allowances. So you're going to make sure to place your fusible interfacing with the side that has the texture, the little bubble glues, that is going to the wrong side of your piece. So the side that you can fill on top should be nice and smooth. Once I have it laid out, I'm then going to take my pressing cloth and very carefully lay it over my pieces, being careful not to shift anything. Once it's on there, then going to dampen the cloth. And you want to make sure that your iron is hot before you place it down onto your fabric. So then I'm going to take my hot iron, I'm going to place it over my pieces, and I'm going to lay it pretty steady for about 5 to 7 seconds. Once you're ready to lift it up, don't shift it, just lift it straight up and move it on to the next area until your interfacing is fused to your neckbands. The last step to number 27 is you want to sew your shoulder seams. So this part where the notches are, that's the shoulder, and you'll see notches here and here. So now you're going to place your pieces right side together, pinning your back to your front neckband. And then you're going to do your standard 5/8 inch seam allowance on each side and press that seam open. Number 28, stay stitch front and back neck edges of neckband facing sections 1/2 from cut edge in direction of arrows. So now you're going to take your other pieces of your neckband, and this is the pieces we have extra with the no interfacing on the back. What you're going to do is you're going to stay stitch. Remember, that's your largest stitch on your machine where you back stitch on both ends. This inner curve area here of the neckband and here and here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then we're going to finish up number 28. And just as you did with your pieces with the interfacing attached, you're then going to match the notches, placing the pieces right side together of this one as well, and then stitch the standard 5/8 inch seam allowance, pressing the seams open after you're done with that. The last part of step 28 is stitch along seam line on notched edge of facing, press under along stitching, trim to 1/4 inch. So from this point on, this shape that does not have interfacing on it, this is now going to be referred to as our facing. The one with interfacing will be the neckband. So what this direction is telling us is we need to stitch a regular width stitch from this point all the way around this edge to this point at the 5/8 inch seam allowance. So once you've done that, you're then going to fold up the edge so you can see your stitching, your 5/8 inch stitching right along this outer edge right here, and then you're going to press that. Once you've pressed it all along this outside curve, you're then going to trim this area right here, so it's only about 1/4 inch above where your stitch line is. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then I'll show you me trimming it so it'll be a little bit more clear. Here's my facing, and it's really hard to see, but my stitching is right along here, and I went ahead and pressed it, and I actually started trimming it. You can see right here it's a little bit shorter, and the edge of my fabric should just be 1/4 inch taller or higher than my stitch line right here. So I have to go ahead and finish the rest of this trimming, and then we'll be able to move on to the next step. We now need to apply our neckband to our top of our dress, to the bodice, and I'm going to look at the directions that say neckband for bodice with sleeves, and it starts with direction number 33. With right sides together, pin front, back, and sleeves to neckband, matching centers, placing armhole seams at small dots, stitch seam, trim seam, clip curves, and press seam towards band. So that seems like a lot. We're going to take it one step at a time. Here I have my bodice. I'm going to take my neckband, and remember this is the one with the interfacing. The right side of the neckband does not have interfacing to it, so we're going to place right side of the neckband to the right side of our garment here of the bodice. Now we need to match notches. We have these 2 little notches here, and I have 2 little notches right here. So I know it doesn't seem natural because this is curving this way and the neckband seems to be curving this way, but it'll all work out. So I'm going to go ahead, pin this. So these 2 notches are going to match, and then if you look on your neckband, you should have a small dot, which I have right here. This is going to match with the first seam that I come to. And we're just lining up the raw edge of the neckband with the raw edge of the top of the bodice. Next we have the shoulder seam, which is going to match the shoulder seam of the bodice. And I'm just doing it on one side, but obviously you're going to do it all up on the other side as well. And once you have the major areas pinned, you can go ahead and finish pinning in between just to smooth everything out so you don't get any wrinkles. Alright, so after we do that, we have another mark right here. This is going to match the next seam that we come to. This is the side or the sleeve seam with the back seam. So I'm gonna match up that mark. And then the last thing we match up, we have a double notch. So that's gonna match up. And then the edge of our neckband with the edge of our bodice. So the same thing is gonna be repeated on the other side, and then just add extra pins so everything lays flat. Go ahead and take it to your machine and do the standard seam allowance, stitching these 2 pieces together. Okay, so now my neckband is stitched onto the top of my bodice, and it's a little tough, but you just got to make sure that you go slowly and you're always checking each side as you're stitching to make sure you're not getting any wrinkles or creases on the other side. But once it's done, we can breathe a sigh of relief. Move on to the next step, which is you need to trim right here. I've already started. See, here's my seam allowance and I've already trimmed it. So there's about, again, about 1/4 inch above your stitch line, and then again you're going to clip these little notches into it. It's always a good idea to do that whenever you have a curved area. Once you finish doing that, you're going to take what's left of your seam allowance and you're going to press all of it towards the neckband. So if I press my neckband on the right side, I'm just going to make sure that all this stuff right here is going upwards towards the top of the neckband. So I'm going to go ahead and finish it and then press it, and then we're going to move on to step 34. Next, the directions say with right sides together, pin neckband facing to neck edge, matching centers and shoulder seams, stitch, neck edge, trim seam, clip curves. So this is what my bodice looks like so far. You can see my neckband has been stitched right up here. And I'm looking at the right side of the garment as it is so far. I'm going to take my neck facing, this is the piece again that does not have the inner facing on it, and I'm going to match the raw edge of my neck facing, the top curve here, with the raw edge of my neckband. So you got to make sure that it goes right side to right side, and the things we're going to be matching is the end corner with the end corner. So I'm going to pin all along here. We have shoulder seam, that's going to match. And then you're going to do the same exact thing over on the other side. So once you finish pinning this whole thing together, you're then going to stitch your 5/8 inch seam allowance. And just as you did before, you're going to trim your seam. So you're just going to trim some of this off so you only have about 1/4 inch sticking up. And then you're going to clip your notches into the curved areas again. Step 35. To understitch, press facing away from garment, press seam toward facing. Facing side up, stitch close to seam through facing and seam allowances. So here's my facing, my neckband, and my bodice. What they want you to do is you're going to pull your facing up away from the neckband and the facing. So this is the right side of the garment. And you're going to press the facing all along the seam right here, making sure that the seam allowance is being pressed up towards the facing. So if I'm pressing on this side, all that seam allowance is right underneath this facing part right here, just like I did with the neckband. Once you finish doing that for the whole length, you're going to stitch right above the seam right here. So all that seam allowance is going to be then attached to the facing. And you're going to want to stitch this with a garment right side up. So then you can see it and stitch right along here the whole way. With that, you'll be done with step number 35. I'm going to do my understitching now for my facing. This is my facing, this is my neckband. So you can see I'm stitching on the side of my facing, and I'm just doing a regular width stitch, including back stitch on each ends, and just trying to get as close as I can to the edge of my seam there, making sure that all my seam allowance is right underneath that stitch. And then that's all you have to do. Just go to the other side and do another back stitch, and then we can move on to the next step. Step number 36. Turn facing to inside, press, pin pressed edge of facing over seam, placing pins on outside. So we're going to start with that, and then we'll move on to the next part of 36. But first, here's my facing, here's my neckband, here's my bodice. I'm looking at the wrong side of the garment, so this is the inside. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold the facing so it's on the wrong side of the garment. It's going to cover all this inner facing on the inside. And you can see my stitching right here. That's my understitching. If you look on the right side, you're not going to see any stitching. But it should be folded so that the seam between the facing and the neckband is right in the middle of that fold. So I'm going to fold all on there, and I'm going to press right here on top so we have a nice crisp edge to our neck. Now remember when we pressed under on the edge of the facing, you're going to fold it under again, and when you fold this in half, this should automatically cover our seam right here between our neckband and our bodice. So all this interfacing and seam allowance and stitching is going to be covered by the edge of our facing. So you want to fold that under so it's nice and neat, just along where you pressed before. Once you have it, you should pin it on the outside because we're going to be stitching on the front. So you just pin it like that. So I'm going to go ahead, fold all this over on the top, press it, and then on the bottom I'm going to make sure that this folded edge covers all my seam allowances from this. To finish our neckband, and also with step number 36, we're going to go ahead and stitch right along this top seam here of our neckband and our bodice. So this is the front of the garment. Our facing has already been turned to the inside, and here's the straight pins we just put on the outside. So again, you're going to stitch right above here, all along the neck. And then what you do when you're done with that, at the very end here, you're going to baste just from the top to probably about right here, just to hold the facing and the band closed here on the end. You're going to do it on this end and then also on the other end. Next, we'll be moving on to step 37, which is for the slim skirt, because we're going to do that instead of the flare skirt. And it says to make pleats and skirt front on outside, fold along solid lines, bring folds to broken lines, pin, baste across raw edges. So if you look at your original pattern piece, and this is pattern number 13, which is the skirt front, you'll notice these lines up here. These lines have to do with the pleats, and again you have your size number for each line. So you definitely want to transfer these lines to your fabric piece so we can create the pleats. So I would do all the ones that have number 14 because I'm doing size 14. Now the way to do pleats is you're going to find the solid line, you're going to fold it so that the line is right on the fold. You're going to bring it to your dotted line, which mine is right here. And then you're just going to pin right up here to hold the fold. And then I would do the same thing over on this side. So here I have my fabric, and this is still folded in half. So I'll have to do this side and do this side. So there'll be 4 pleats in the front. So again, here's my solid line. I'm going to fold it. I'm going to bring it to the dotted line, line up these raw edges on the top, and then I just pin it. I'm going to do it for all 4 of these little pleats. Once I've done that, what you're going to do is just baste right across the top here in order to hold it without any pins. It's just a temporary stitch, so you don't have to worry about back stitching. But that's all you have to do, and then we'll move on to the next step. In number 38, we're making our darts again, but this time we're doing it in the skirt back. So you're going to be making 2 darts, 1 in each part of your skirt back. And again, we have a triangle with dotted lines. So you're going to fold this area in half. So this point is going to be right on the fold. Putting your pins perpendicular to that fold. And then here, folding this in half, making sure that your lines and dots line up, which they do on that. And so I'm going to pin all along here and then stitch right along my dotted line, creating that dart. And remember, you just run your stitch right off the edge of your fabric so you can do a hand-tied knot there. When you finish sewing your dart, just make sure that you take your dart and you press it towards the center of the back. And the center of the back is the one that has the straight edge, not the one that's kind of curvy. This is going to be the side. So this is looking at the wrong side, and I just took my iron and pressed it in this direction. We're now going to be working with a vent, and this is step 39. To edge, finish long edge of vent extension, stitch under 1/4 inch, zigzag or overlock serge. So this is what they're talking about, this little area that sticks out of our back skirt piece. So you have two of them that you're going to have to work with because there's two back pieces, and they're giving you a choice. From this area to this area, you can either fold this over 1/4 inch and then stitch right along the edge here. You can go to your machine and do a zigzag stitch right along the edge, or if you have a serger machine, you can also just serge the edge. I am going to actually fold this over 1/4 inch and stitch it. Now you need to make sure that you have the wrong side of the garment facing up towards you because we want this fold to be tucked on the inside of the skirt. So all I'm going to do is use my sewing gauge, measure 1/4 inch, press it when I go from here to here, and then just stitch right along this edge here on my machine. The second part of 39 reads, to form vent and stitch center back seam, starting at lower edge, machine base along solid line to large dot. Stitch along seam line between large dot and notch. Back stitch at notch to reinforce seam. So here I have my skirt back and it's right side facing up. I can tell because if I look at my dart, it's just a single line here. What I'm going to do is take my other skirt back and I'm going to place it so they're right side to right side and they're lined up right on top of the other. Just like that. I want to line up the raw edges together, and from this corner, the notch and the bottom should all be at the same point. I'm going to pin all along this length. Now if you look at your pattern piece, right here at the top of the vent, there should be a large dot. From the bottom, there's going to be a line going to this dot. So what you need to do is all along this line, you need to do a baste. From this dot to the notch, you're going to do a regular width machine stitch at the 5/8 inch seam allowance. You're going to back stitch at the notch and right here, right above your large dot. From the notch to the top, you're just going to leave it open. So I'm going to go ahead, pin it up. I'm going to baste from here to here, regular stitch from here to here, and then leave this open. Alright, so now we're on step 40. Reinforce inner corner and stitch upper end of vent extensions together as follows. Starting 1 inch above large dot, stitch along seam line to large dot, pivot at large dot, and stitch across the upper end of vent extensions. Clip right back to the large dot at inner corner. So here I have my two back pieces sewn together. And what I'm going to do is, here's my large dot right here. I'm going to start 1 inch above it and I'm going to stitch right over my same seam right here. Once I get to the large dot, I'm going to put my needle down, lift my foot, pivot the fabric underneath my foot. So now I can stitch in this direction all the way to the end and back stitch. Once you've done that, you're then going to take your scissors and you're going to cut right in this corner on this angle right to your stitch line. You don't want to get too close that you actually cut your stitch line, but you just want to get to it, so then this will separate from this part. So again, from here you're going to stitch, pivot, stitch, and then cut. 41. Press seam open above clip, press vent extension toward left back, baste upper edge of vent extension in place along stitching. So now I have it, this is the wrong side still of my garment, of my skirt back. And here's my vent, here's the seam. So from here where I cut to my notch, I'm going to go ahead, take this to my iron, and I'm going to press the seam open. Just like this. So this is all going to be pressed open nice and flat. This part I'm going to press in this direction. So if you're looking at it from the wrong side, it's going to go to the right. If you're looking at it from the right side of the garment, it would look like it's going towards the left. You're going to press it in this direction. Once you've done that, you're going to go to your machine and you're going to baste right along your stitch line you just did. When you made that pivot, just baste it. It's just going to be a temporary stitch to hold it down so then we can stitch it on the right side of our skirt. I've turned my skirt over so it's the right side of the back. And it's kind of hard to see, but here's my basting stitch temporarily holding my vent to the left side of my skirt. What I'm going to do now is, by looking at the right side, I'm going to stitch right over my basting stitch, and that's going to permanently hold this to the left side. Then I'm going to remove my basting stitch and remove my basting stitch here, and then our slit will be complete, and that's the end of step 42. We're now moving on to our pockets. Number 43 is with right sides together, pin pocket to garment, matching large dots, having raw edges even. Stitch in 3/8 inch seam. So here again is the back, and I still have it right side up. I'm going to take one of my pockets. I have 4 of them, but I just need one right now. And it's going to go right side to right side, and I'm going to line up this corner, the notch, and then also these dots right here, because I have these dots and then I have dots on my skirt. So I'm going to make sure that those line up and that these raw edges line up. I'm going to go ahead and pin and then stitch not in a 5/8 but in a 3/8, which is 1/8 smaller than a 1/2 inch. So 3/8 of an inch right along here, and then I'm going to press my pocket away from the garment like this. All your seam allowance that you have gets pressed toward the pocket. So when you press it out, it should be right underneath the pocket. So I'm going to do it 4 times. 2 in the back, 1 on each side, and then 2 on the front skirt. After pockets have been stitched in and pressed outward, we're then going to move on to step number 45. Pin front to back at side seams, matching large dots. Stitch side seams, leaving an opening between the large dots. Stitch pocket edges together from side seam to upper edge. So here I have my skirt back. It's right side facing up. I'm then going to take the front of my skirt and I'm going to place it over the top of my back, right sides together. And I'm going to line it up. And I'm going to make sure that the bottom edge matches with my top edge and that all my pockets line up and everything. I'm going to go ahead and pin both on this edge and then over there as well. Now again, we have our large dots right here. What we're going to do is we're going to stitch from the top to the first large dot, back stitching on both ends. I'm not going to stitch in between these 2 dots because that's where we have the hole for our pocket. From this dot, I'm going to back stitch, stitch to the bottom, back stitch again. For this pocket, once everything is lined up and pinned, you're going to stitch from the top here around the curve to your seam over here. All these seams are going to be your standard 5/8 inch seam allowance. So again, I'm also going to do it over on this side. So from here to here, this dot, nothing in between these dots. Then from this bottom dot to the bottom of the skirt, pocket from the top all the way over to where our seam is over on this side. Okay, so this is the last thing we need to do to finish up our pockets. Number 46. Clip garment back seam allowance below pocket. Press seam open below clip. Press pocket toward front. Baste upper edge of pocket to front, having raw edges even. So the first thing we're going to do is at the bottom of each pocket on this side and that side over there, you're going to clip to your stitch in your seam. You're not going to actually cut the seam because we don't want to cause a hole. So now that this is cut, everything below this, you're going to press your seam open. So from here to here, this is going to be pressed open at your ironing board. Next, your pocket is going to be pressed towards the front of the dress. So this is my skirt that has all the pleats. That's the front. So the pocket needs to be pressed in this direction like this. Lastly, you're going to match the raw edge of the top of the pocket with the top part of the front skirt. So just the front skirt, the back skirt can just stay loose. So once you pin this, all you're going to do is just baste the top of the pocket to your front skirt. You could probably just do it at a 1/2 inch. So we can temporarily hold this to our skirt. We're now going to attach our bodice to our skirt using step 47. With the right sides together, stitch skirt to bodice at waistline seam, matching centers and side seams, press seam toward bodice. So here's my skirt. It's inside out. So the wrong side is on the outside here, and the inside is obviously the right side. I'm going to take my bodice and I'm going to have it actually right side out. So here's my bodice. The neckline of my bodice, I'm going to stick into the inside of my skirt, making sure the neckline is towards the bottom of the skirt. The top, or the bottom of the bodice is going to be lined up with the raw edge here at the top of the skirt. So I'm going to take this, stick it inside the skirt, bring out the bottom of the bodice, and you'll notice on the front of your skirt there'll be 2 notches in between your pleats. This matches up with the 2 notches on the bottom of my bodice. You're just going to make sure that the raw edges line up and the notches line up, and then you're going to pin it. And I'm going to do the same thing with this notch over here. Okay. You also have a notch in the back, so you're going to line up those. So I have one on this side, and then I have one over on this side. And you're going to pin from here all the way over to this other side and stitch your 5/8 inch seam allowance. And then you're going to take all the seam allowance and you're going to press it upward towards your bodice if you were to take your bodice out of your skirt. So once this is done, then those 2 pieces will be attached and we can move on to installing the zipper. Here we have the dress right side out, and as you can see we have the bodice and then the skirt portion of the dress. And now we're ready to put in the zipper. It's starting to look like a dress here. So let's see, number 60 is the start of putting in the zipper. Press under 5/8 of an inch on left back opening edge and 1/2 inch on right back opening edge. So I'm just going to stop there because there's actually a lot going on in 60, and we'll just take it one step at a time. So looking at the back of the dress, here is the opening where the zipper is going to go in. We have the left side and the right side. So what they're saying is on the left side, you're going to fold this under, and the edge that's folded under should measure 5/8 of an inch. So I'm going to do it from the top to where the opening ends down here. On the right side, you're going to do the same thing. You're going to fold it under. This folded under should measure 1/2 inch. So we have 5/8 on this side, 1/2 on this side. And again, you're going to do from the top to where the opening ends here. So you're going to go ahead and pin both sides by their respective measurements and then go to the ironing board and press it. Next, we're going to be starting to pin our zipper to our folded edge. After this opening has been pinned and pressed, you're then going to take your 22-inch zipper and you're going to place it so that the teeth of the zipper is right alongside your fold here. And we're just doing the right side first. Now your tab of the zipper, the top of the tab should be 3/8 of an inch below the top edge of your dress here. So I'm just gonna move this down to 3/8. And this that sticks up, the zipper tape, you can fold it over so that it's right in between your fold here. So between this and this edge. So once that's in there, you can then pin it again. And I'm going to do this down the whole length of the way to get some of these pins here. So again, the fold goes right alongside the teeth of the zipper. Don't stick yourself like I just did. And I'm going to do it for the whole length. So after I pin this, I'm then gonna baste this edge down. And I'm actually going to baste it by hand just because it'll be a lot easier to take out, and also I'll have a lot more control with it. But I can show you a closer look at that. I'm just going to finish pinning this and then I'll show you how to do that. To do my hand basting stitch, I'm going to take my threaded needle, and you can see I have a contrasting color thread, so it's easy for me to see. Come up from underneath and then go down, and I'm doing my stitches about a 1/2 inch big. It's a nice thing about hand basting is you can make your stitches fairly large, and that way they're easy to take out. It doesn't take as long to stitch. And I'm just going to do this along the whole length of the zipper. Now that I've taken care of the right hand side, I now need to do the left hand. Now, just like as we did before, the top of your zipper tab is going to be 3/8 of an inch down from the top of your neck right here. Also, you're going to tuck this extra piece in between the fold. Now, the one difference is you want the fold right here of the left hand side to overlap the zipper teeth by 1/8 of an inch. So when you have it pinned, it's going to just cover the zipper teeth, and you won't really be able to see your zipper. Now, you need to use your finger to feel the zipper teeth as you're doing your basting stitch, because you want it to have it right next to it. So I'm going to go ahead and pin all this down, and then I'm going to do my hand basting stitch again. The next part is we're going to go to the machine so we can use the zipper foot then to put in a permanent stitch that we can use our basting stitch as a guideline in order to install it. When I'm ready to sew on my zipper with my machine, I'm going to make sure I switch to a zipper foot. Now, yours probably looks different than mine. Usually they're a little skinny foot. Mine is just interchangeable, so I can switch from this side or this side. I'm going to make sure whatever side I choose, the edge of my foot gets as close to the zipper teeth as I can possibly get, so I can go ahead and stitch next to that. I went ahead and also unzip my zipper a little bit because it makes it really hard to get around the tab of the zipper. So I just like to sew a little bit, and then I'll go ahead and zip it up again. So if you did really straight basting stitches, you can go ahead and just follow those stitches. It makes it really easy if you've done it that way. I'm not very good at it, so I'm not going to. So when I want to move my zipper tab up, I'm just going to put my needle down, lift my foot, and then zip it up. Like that, and then I can continue the rest of the way. See, this side right here is the side that's overhanging, so I'm just folding it over so I can make sure that I don't accidentally stitch it. And that's basically how you put in the zipper. So I'm going to do this side, and then I'm going to do the other side. When I get to the end of the zipper tape, I can just put my needle down, lift my foot, and pivot and sew in this direction to get to the other side. That way I can just do one continuous stitch. Once you've finished stitching in your zipper, you can go ahead and take out your basting stitch. Now we can move on to doing the hem at the bottom of the dress and finishing this up. So the next step is step 61. It says open out left back extension, press up hem. So there's more, but we're going to focus on the first part. If you look at the bottom of your pattern piece for the skirt section, you'll see that it says 1 1/4 inch hem allowed. So I already have my sewing gauge here. And when it says to open up the left back extension, it's just telling you to open this up because we need to finish this side as well. And all I'm going to do is press up 1 1/4 inches all the way around the bottom of my dress here. Once I have that, I'm going to press it, and then it gives you a choice. It says, okay, you need to edge finish this because we don't want to have this ugly raw edge on the inside of our dress. So you could either zigzag stitch right on the edge of it, you could serge it if you have a serger, or you could turn this under 1/4 inch, which is what I'm going to do. So after I finish pressing my 1 1/4, I'm going to turn this over 1/4 of an inch. So then my finished depth for this hem is 1 inch. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to press it, take it to the machine, and stitch right along the top. I'm not stitching it to the front of my dress yet. This is just going to have a finished edge before I fold over and continue with the rest of 61. After you do the edge finish of your choice, you can then slip stitch your hem into place. So I have my threaded needle here, and yes, this is going to be hand sewing because it looks a little bit more elegant than doing it by the machine. And I also call this the blind hem. What you're going to do is you're going to take your needle, and I want the knot to be hidden, so I'm going to take this folded part only. You see, I'm not grabbing the front of the skirt, just my folded part, and pull that through. I'm going to grab a little bit of my dress. See, now I'm grabbing this part here. And then I'm back to grabbing a little bit of the fold, just the fold only. So you're going back and forth between the two. Now when I grab my dress, it's best to do as little of a stitch as possible. And you see I go vertical instead of parallel to the edge of my fold here. It just hides it a little better, like that. And once I do that, now I grab a little bit of the fold and then a little bit of the dress. And I'm going to do this all the way around until I get to the other side of my slit. I could just move my pins out of the way, and now I'm going to go little vertical stitch, just trying to make it look as neat as possible. And now back to this one. So that's all you need to do. After you finish slip stitching your hem, the only thing left to do for the hem is to take your extension, refold it back over, and then slip stitch from here to here, just this little part right there. And then you're done with the hem. After you finish your hem, you can add a hook and eye to the top of your zipper. Some people like having that extra little closure up there. And for the hook and eye, let me just take it apart. You have your hook and you have your eye on this side. And I just stitch them to the wrong side of my garment. So this is the inside of my garment, right at the very top of my zipper. And as you can see on the ends, there's these little holes. That's where I stitch through. I just stitch from my zipper tape through my hole back to my zipper tape. So I'm not going through my whole fabric dress here, just the zipper tape. Once I stitch that on both sides, and I just have my eye sticking out a little bit past my edge. For the hook, I like it flushed with the edge. And then once it's done, you just hook it through, just like that, and there you go. Here we have the finished dress. I've removed the basting stitches, cut all my loose threads, and added a velvet ribbon for a belt as an accent. You can also consult the Simplicity pattern directions for other accent ideas, such as belts and trims. The style is very elegant and fun, and can be your new go-to party dress.